My wife's joining us today, Sabrina. Yeah, it's awesome. And then we have Farron Gillespie's here, and Justin and Kinsey Ruskevich are with us as well, kind of each representing a different stage of life and yet seeking to practice the Sabbath. And so while you are asking questions, if you don't ask questions, we'll make some up. And so let's make sure and get some in. But let's start with the Ruskeviches here. And just let us know, how long have you been seeking to practice Sabbath, and what led you guys to start doing that?
Yeah, so we have been seeking to practice the Sabbath for a little over 2 years now. We were going through a study with our church called Emotionally Healthy Spirituality. I almost forgot. But we were just in a really busy season for us at that time, and we were not making time to connect, let alone with each other or with God in a weekly sense. So we knew that we needed to implement those rhythms in order to create rest in our lives.
That was perfect. I got nothing to add.
And what day do you guys Sabbath on?
Yeah, we Sabbath on Saturdays all days. So from the morning till night, that's our Sabbath.
Got us a little ahead. I apologize, but I got us a little ahead there because we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But
Yep.
Farron, how long have you been seeking to practice Sabbath? What led you to do that?
So I've been practicing Sabbath for 4 years, not perfectly. Let me be so clear. But after I graduated college, I did a leadership and discipleship program. And a large part of that program was just us implementing lots of spiritual disciplines in our life. So we would memorize scripture and fast and pray and all these things. And so it felt natural for Sabbath to also be included in that. And so it was a really sweet place to learn how to Sabbath with like 20 other 20-somethings and a whole camp property to ourselves. It was great. But yeah, since then, just in moving and stuff, have been just figuring out in each stage of life that I've been in. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I don't know if I've shared in the series what led Sabrina and I to start practicing Sabbath, but we've been practicing since around January of 2020. There was a Sunday afternoon, I was working in the church office we were at the time. I was listening to a sermon from a church in New Jersey called Liquid Church, Pastor Tim Lucas. He was doing I didn't know what he was preaching on until I listened to it. He was preaching on the Sabbath, and my mind was just blown, my heart convicted. And I texted Sabrina while I was watching the message and said, "You've got to go watch this message," and sent her a link. And we were both just so challenged and convicted by the fact that, one, we were missing out on this gift of rest that God had rooted into creation for us, and we'd pretty much been ignoring one of his commands from the 10 Commandments. I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I'll never forget the conviction I felt. I felt like it just like stabbed me in the heart. Like, how could I be breaking the fourth commandment when, I don't know, I thought I was doing pretty good on all the commandments, but like it was so challenging. And I didn't grow up in church until I was a teenager, but I know I probably read the 10 Commandments more than once, so to know that I'm breaking the fourth, it was just, I don't know, it was very challenging.
Yep. And so we've been practicing for about 5 years. It'll be coming up on 5 years here in January. So there are questions rolling in, but I did want to, before we start answering some questions, another one that I've asked you guys to answer is, what currently in your stage of life you're in now does your Sabbath look like? And again, if you'd share what day you guys are choosing, which I already asked you and got ahead of us, but go ahead and share that.
Yeah, so a little bit of our background. We moved from Michigan to here, H-Town, last year, and we have a 1-year-old son, Malachi. If y'all know Malachi, y'all know we're pretty busy pretty often. So, in our stage of life, Sabbath, and as much as all parts of our schedule, revolves around Kai, his needs, his time when he wakes up, when he goes to bed, when he needs to take a nap, everything. And so, which can be very challenging for the factor of Sabbath being rest. And sometimes it can be hard to make that rest happen. So we understand that there's just having a realistic expectation of having a 1-year-old in the home and us kind of being out here on our own. We have an amazing support from our church family, of course. But, our day really is just kind of fluid based off of what that looks like. But we do our best not not to schedule things on our Sabbath. And of course, we're not perfect at that. But when, Malachi goes down for a nap, Lord willing, 2 hours, hopefully more. But we take that as a good chance. Kinsey will get a nap in. I might read a book or watch some football. And then after dinner, and Kai goes to bed, that's another opportunity for us to get a devotional time in, pray for each other, maybe have a Bible study, and just wrap up the night and just take it easy, enjoy time together. Because we both work full time, and so we try to make the most of that time throughout the week. But as I'm sure many of us know here, it's, our schedules could get so busy, and that relational time to connect with the Lord for one thing, and then also for each other, it's easy to miss the prioritizing that needs to happen. And the Sabbath is our point to recenter the priority in our life for family, for God, for our relationships with each other, and for us to just slow down. And so it's hard at times, for sure. Some other things practically for Sabbath for us is, we're trying to get better at, prepping meals, prior. That was one thing that we talked about in first service. And, I was impressed by some of the answers y'all gave. I just eat sandwiches. So we could do better in that. My standards need to get up a little bit. But we do love pizza. And so we do pizza Saturdays. And Malachi loves it. And I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. And beyond that as well, it is a day that's unplanned, that is slow paced. It's enjoying each other. It's enjoying conversation. It's enjoying Malachi. We know that we don't get this time again. And so we're going to make the most of it. Awesome. And this is a learned thing that we're still trying to get down. So that's a little bit of a snapshot for us. Do you have anything to add to that? Okay,
that's good. Aaron, what day do you Sabbath on? What's it look like typically as you're trying to do it?
Mm-hmm. So I typically Sabbath on Saturday as well. We love a Saturday. And it's just me, myself, and I. So I get to pick what I want to do. But I try really hard because I can be very quick to think and overthink, to just have things in mind that I know I typically would enjoy. Just so when the moment comes where I'm like, I kind of want to do something, I'm not thinking what should I be doing? Or have I done this? But I can just kind of pick do I want to do a puzzle? Do I want to bake? Do I want to do something else? So right now I feel like my brain is catching up with my body because I have a lot of friends getting married, so I've been traveling a lot. So right now Sabbath will always include waking up late and then also taking a nap for at least 2 hours. Sorry if that sounds like I'm bragging. I'm just being serious. I need that.
I'm just jealous.
Amen.
Yeah, I'm so this is going to sound so selfish. I'm sorry. But yeah, so I'll wake up whenever I want to, eat some breakfast, and then just kind of let the day kind of decide for me. I've been watching a lot of football because there's been a lot of good football going on. I might go to a coffee shop, but I will be the only certainty at this point is that I'm taking a nap.
Come on.
Everything else, it's kind of just in there.
Hey, Jesus took naps.
Jesus took naps, man.
During storms.
I am being like Christ. Yeah. And then another thing that's helpful for me because my brain is very active is I just try really hard not to look at the clock. I am just learning more and more because again, I don't do this perfectly, but man, it is difficult to watch the time go by and be like, am I resting enough? Should I feel different? Oh my gosh, it's almost 6 o'clock and I'm tired. I don't know what to do. So I just try not to look at the clock and just let the day be what it is. And in doing that, just trusting that, man, this is 24 hours that God has given me to enjoy and to delight in Him and to remember that my identity is not in what I do, but just in being His child. And so those are just kind of some things that I generally do. But for certain, I'm doing what? Taking a nap.
Come on.
So, yeah.
Well, and speaking of the football, Jeff, you must have had an amazing Sabbath yesterday. And everybody, right? Hey, roll tears. Anyway.
Wow. Okay. I wasn't going to say anything, but I'm glad you did.
I'm from Michigan. I have no dog in the fight, but roll tears anyway.
All right. I just thought about this as you guys were all talking. I'm 50 years old. I wish I would have been practicing the Sabbath when I was in my 20s, like you guys are doing. So, good on you for seeking to engage it early on in life, especially seeking it with having a child in the home. We did not practice Sabbath when our children were younger. And so when we transitioned to practicing, all of our kids were teenagers. And so we did not force them to do what we were doing. But somebody did actually ask, how do you prioritize Sabbath when you have young children? It's a phenomenal question, maybe one of the most common ones. And so I don't know if you want to add anything. I've got a couple of thoughts too I want to share.
I would love to, and I'm sure we might have two different answers. But for a little background on my family, I had a family again from Michigan, so we would go to the lake a lot, and we would be on the boat often, grilling, barbecue. It was just such a great time, almost every weekend for like the 2 months it's warm in Michigan. Then it's freezing all the time. What was really interesting, and we were talking about this over dinner this past week, that we rested and we slowed down and we enjoyed time together. The only thing that was missing was Jesus. And so we never had the true Sabbath rest that we really were kind of practicing, but not to the full extent that, our souls needed and what God wants for us, because Jesus wasn't in the middle. Now, going back to the question about having, kids in the home, young family, as I mentioned earlier, you need to have realistic expectations and give grace to yourself, like so much grace, because God just wants you to know that he loves you and he wants to be loved. And that's really the heart of the Sabbath. It's a gift, and it's that blessing for us to love God and be loved by God. And the challenge that I would say, though, is there is, sometimes because we get so busy being, young families, and trust me, we know that it can be almost a reason not to do what we need to do. A part of it can be a priority thing, but also I would say that this is a part of our witness to the world around us. That the Sabbath, even we go back to the Old Testament, the focus of the Sabbath was setting apart God's people, consecrating themselves to him so that the world around could see who God is and the way God works. He doesn't work in the chaos of busyness of 24/7 every single day going at it. He blesses the rest that we take. And so what I would say, the same thing for us today is we have a witness to give to the world around us through our rest. And maybe that just starts with a couple hours.
Yeah.
Maybe Sabbath rest just starts with an hour. Maybe it's your car ride to work. I don't know, just getting some time to slow down and to be with God. And I really think, Jeff has told me this before too, that, it's really good to start there, but don't let it stay there. We could take steps. It's like a marathon, getting little by little better at Sabbath each and every time we take it. For us, that's what we're trying to work on. Do you have anything to add to that?
So I think what's really practical for us, so we know our kid's probably going to wake up at like 6, 7 a.m., right? So we know to go to bed a little bit early, and then we can just be really fluid with what's going on throughout our day. The only real time frame that we have is, okay, we need to be home by 11 so that he can eat lunch and go to bed and take a nap. And then we need to be back for his bedtime. So everything else in between can be as relaxed as we want it to be. So we can go for a walk, and we know the time frame that we have. We can go get dinner if we want to, and we know the time frame we have. So just knowing the time that you have can be really helpful to not be rushing around, but to plan accordingly, I guess.
Yeah, and the parenting question is a phenomenal one, because obviously you can't just ignore your kids. Well, you can, but it's not advised.
Please don't.
Please don't. But some things that we would have done that I have heard given as great advice, for especially with young children, is choose some things that you only do on Sabbath that your kids can look forward to. So if it's pizza, we only get pizza on Sabbath. And that becomes something they look forward to as a special part of Sabbath day. Another thing that many families do is called a Sabbath toy box, that there's specific toys they buy that are only come out on the Sabbath, that then those kids look forward to. Hey, that's a Sabbath toy box. And they open up the toys. That's something they only engage in on the Sabbath day. And then I think it's just teaching kids the priority. Now, you can't stop changing diapers. You can't stop feeding them. You can't doing all those things. But they can see you making that day different by making it a priority to stop, rest, delight, and worship, those things that we've talked about in the series. And so it's a season. That season will change. And trust me, when they're teenagers, it's just as difficult. And when you have grandkids, it's just as difficult. Sabbath never gets easier. It just gets different. Everything fights against Sabbath. Whether you're little kids or whether you have grown kids, everything fights against it. The point is being intentional to do something with it.
If I could just add one more thing to that. One strategy for young families that I highly recommend, something that Kinsey and I learned from some mentors back in Michigan is, we can work together as spouses to help each other rest. So maybe it's for me, hey, I'm going to take Kai for a couple hours. Go do what gives you that rest in the Lord, that time to just connect with him, to delight, to read a book, to go hang out with a friend. over some coffee. And same for the other way around. And that might have to be what the realistic expectation is set for your family at this time. And you guys can partner together in that. It is so possible. It is not easy. It does definitely take work to figure that out. But I think that if you even just start small and work together, it is very possible for you to even start Sabbathing this week, this weekend, whenever.
Awesome. Thank you. This is a great question, by the way, and I'm glad somebody asked. I was hoping somebody would. Colossians 2:16 and 17, Paul seems to say that the Sabbath is not a requirement. How do we reconcile that with it being the fourth commandment? So let me read to you Colossians 2:16 and 17. So don't let anyone condemn you for what you eat or drink, or for not celebrating certain holy days or new moon ceremonies or Sabbaths. It's a plural word, not a singular word. For these rules are only shadows of the reality yet to come, and Christ himself is that reality. And so I actually have a note in my scripture from a theologian. Now I just lost it. Let me go back to it. Pause.
Someone do the Jeopardy music. There we go.
Guys, don't all stare at him. It's going to make him nervous.
There we go. So this is from Albert Barnes in his commentary. There is no evidence from this passage that he would teach that there was no obligation to observe any holy time, for there is not the slightest reason to believe that he meant to teach one of the 10 commandments had ceased to be binding on mankind. If he had used the word in the singular number, the Sabbath, it would then, of course, have been clear that he meant to teach that that commandment had ceased to be binding and that a Sabbath was no longer to be observed. But the use of the term in the plural number and the connection show that he had his eye on the great number of days which were observed by the Israelites as festivals, as a part of their ceremonial and typical law, not the moral law or the 10 commandments. So it's an interesting theological debate. There are many people who believe that it is no longer a binding part of the 10 commandments. I don't know why God would give 10 moral commandments and only remove one for us under Christ. I think he gave those 10 very specifically for a specific reason for all time. Now, again, you got to decide what you're going to do with that. But as we'll see in the message on this coming Sunday, Jesus observed the Sabbath for decades and centuries after the resurrection. All the apostles and early followers of Jesus practiced the Sabbath, many of them moving it from Saturday to Sunday to observe the Sabbath. But it wasn't until long after the Industrial Revolution that we began to ignore the Sabbath law and fill it up with other things. For centuries, it was honored and practiced among Christians long after the resurrection. So it can appear as if Paul's doing away with it. I don't think he is. But again, that's my opinion based on the limited amount of research that I have done as well. It is a great question, and there's a lot of debate around that as well. So again, thanks for asking that.
I would add that, if you look at the way that Jesus walked, he did say that, Sabbath is made for man, not man for the Sabbath. But the context of that's so important. He was living in a time where the Pharisees or teachers of the law were demanding that people would take the Sabbath the way that they did it. Like there was this rule of like, if you don't do these things like we do it, then you are not like worthy enough of God, that we're gonna make this wall and you can't connect with God because you're not holy like I am. And I think that a part of the reminder to me when I read that is thinking to be careful that a life that's built on simplicity, slowing down, and Sabbath, it becomes legalistic or like forceful when we try to say how I do things is how you have to do it. And one of the most freeing things about the Sabbath and what brings freedom for me is to know that what can bring me rest is going to be different from what brings someone else rest, but all of it is connected to the life-giving relationship with Jesus and his love infused within us and us loving him back through observing the Sabbath. So what I would say to that and how to reconcile it well, and again, I mean, there's so many other great answers, I'm sure, but one thing I just think of is, to not make the way you do it more important than why you do it and who you do it for and the relationship that you're cultivating between God and the others in your life.
One last thing, too, I think is really good, is to not ask the question, is it wrong, but ask the question, is it wise? Is there wisdom in stopping for a day of rest? Whether it's wrong or right, really is not the question. Is it wise is the question. And it's wise to stop and take a day of rest. So next question, I'm gonna jump past the one that's on the very top, because we kind of answered that in the parenting one. It's a great question. If we need to come back to it, we will. But is it wrong to eat at a restaurant on the Sabbath? I'm gonna let the ladies answer this.
No. Do it. Why? Yeah, absolutely. I go to Wingstop like every Saturday because I love that place. Yeah, I think it's great. I think it's, yeah, you're just enjoying. I love Chili's, so my first thought is Chili's. But yeah, like enjoy someone cooking for you. That's a nice, like God-honoring thing in its
Out
own
of
way.
all the restaurants in
Chili's.
Houston, this Chili's?
Absolutely. I had a Chili's last night actually because I
Wow.
didn't want Wingstop. Yeah.
Wow.
3 for me. I'm not only giving you biblical wisdom, but like economically speaking, a 3 for me is prime. But yeah, I think again, kind of going back to what we were saying, like it doesn't have to be this very strict thing or a restrictive thing. It should be an enjoyable thing. So if it's enjoyable for you to go out to eat, then do that. If it stresses you out, like try and find joy in making something. I choose to like bake on Sabbath, or I might make my own breakfast because that's joyful for me. If it's not, go eat somewhere. Maybe Chili's. Let's not talk like it's the worst restaurant out here. First of all. But yeah, like please do that. And then what's really cool is you don't have to clean up afterwards. And you might have leftovers. The question was a good one, but the answer is for sure. I'll just say that.
Kenzie, Sabrina, any thoughts on going out to eat?
One of my stop things is cooking on the Sabbath.
So you stop cooking on
I
Sabbath.
stopped cooking. So I try to make enough extra during the week that we have leftovers on Saturday. We do pizza to start our Sabbath, but then I don't know if we've ever gone out to eat on Sabbath. Normally we just eat at home, and it's just very random leftover. We do make breakfast. Sometimes Jeff will make it. It hasn't happened in a while, I'll tell you that. So I had to make my own breakfast.
Calling me out
Should we leave?
in front of everybody.
Should we leave? Why am I in the
Guess
middle
who's
of
making
this?
breakfast this week?
Yeah.
That was fire.
And I'll post it on social media.
No, we don't get on social
Proofread.
media.
The next day.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Man, who gave you a mic?
You did.
Any thoughts on?
I mean, for me, just having a little kid, it's actually way more stressful to go out to eat, which is why we do pizza, or like last night we did Chick-fil-A, right?
Yeah.
So having one of our meals that we don't have to cook or worry about any real dishes, that's helpful. But I personally hate going out to eat with a 1-year-old because their attention spans are 0.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's good.
Stage
All
of
right.
life. Stage of life.
Can attending church in person be considered rest? Absolutely, it can. I will actually say, if I was not a pastor, like this is part of my job today, I get paid to do what I'm doing. If I was not a pastor, I would probably Sabbath on Sunday, so that worship, being with the family of God, becomes a part of my day in rest. Remember the 4 parts of the framework of Sabbath: stop, rest, delight, and worship. Worship, for me, I love the musical part of our service where we collectively lift up the name of Christ together. It brings rest to my soul. And so worship can be a part of rest. I don't know if anybody has any comments on that, but man, if you want to make Sunday your day of rest and you make worship a part of it, 100%. This question is 3 words: sports on Sundays?
Absolutely. Go Lions. Anyway. Yeah, right. It's fine. I understand. 26-23. I'll just leave it at that. No, I would say, like, again, it's all about what you delight in, right? And I think that, you know, the one thing that I've found challenging, and like, you know, Kinsey and I have come from 2 different backgrounds. Like, Kinsey's very like organized, type A. It was very challenging just to like slow down because she's very productive and focused. Where for me, it was super easy to. But the challenge was, hey, this isn't just a day to like waste my time playing video games. This isn't just a day to completely immerse myself in a YouTube rabbit hole. This isn't a day just for pleasure's sake. Like, there is an element of a holy focus, I would say. And so nothing wrong with watching football or playing some video games or enjoying some time, doing whatever you like to do. But I think it's just a matter of, is that consuming your day? Has that become the end-all, be-all? Or is it focused back on Christ and delighting in the presence of God and with each other? And so thankfully, Michigan's not that great this year. So my Saturdays have been pretty free of football. More so just making fun of Oklahoma for not doing good, for Texas for being Texas. But, I'll just leave that there. Go Blue.
Farron, you said you watch football on Sabbath.
Do.
Yeah.
I would say, I think anything that can allow you to still be conscious of where your train of thought is. If your mood is dependent on if your team wins or not, it might not be wise. Just watch the highlights the next day. I'm speaking as a Cowboys fan. Please don't boo me. Oof. I have already been through enough this year. Please spare me. But if your mood, if your ability to think consciously of God's delight in you is dependent on a literal 20-year-old making a pass, that's probably not wise. I would just try and be conscious of, man, is this something that's gonna allow me to delight in the Lord? Is this something that's gonna give me rest? Or is this just a routine that I assume everyone else is doing and I don't wanna be left out? Because another part of the Sabbath is being okay with being left out of something. I might not check my text messages as much today. I might not know the score of the game. I might miss out on these things, but what I'm getting in exchange is so much more valuable than knowing how that game ended or something like that. So I say just be cautious, be careful, and if it comes down to I have to do this and I would do this rather than Sabbath, I would encourage you. I can't do it for you, but I would encourage you to kind of leave that open-handed before the Lord of man, is this the most important part about who God has made me to be and how I want to spend my time?
If I could just say one more thing too, because that's such a great point that you bring up, Farron. I think we're easily guilty, and I'm speaking to myself here, that we make this wall between the sacred and the secular. God is in this box that's Sundays at church, whenever I listen to worship music, whenever I read my Bible, and then there's the rest of my life. And I just think that's super inaccurate to the heart of Jesus, where all of life is spiritual. All of life can point back to Jesus. And my dad, seriously, I know I'm a Lions fan, I'm crazy, but, I went to the football game. I went, to NRG Stadium with my dad, my father-in-law, and I can tell you, it was one of the most amazing moments for me. And was I pulling out my Bible literally? No. So how was it a holy moment? Because for me, I was in that moment fully. I enjoyed it. I embraced it. I knew that this isn't going to be a moment that happens a lot, and I hold on to that. I think for all of us, we can look at, when our kids are in sports, or when, we have maybe a concert to go to, or maybe we just have a day of nothing, and what am I going to do being bored? It's okay, because God is in all of it. And if we can just put our focus back on him, that's when the power of the Sabbath really blesses us. Yeah. And we have to stop compartmentalizing faith in one place, everything else in another, when God is meant to be in it all. That's all I wanted to add.
That's good. This is a great question. If schedules do not permit observing Sabbath on the same day, can a husband and wife practice Sabbath on separate days?
Absolutely, yeah.
You want to say anything? Because we've done that.
We have done that, not very often.
Yeah.
But I do want to say we don't Sabbath anything alike. Even though we might be Sabbathing on the same day, we don't even really...
We don't spend all day together.
No, we don't even really talk that much.
That you're trying to get away from me. You need a rest from me.
Yes.
Because you didn't make breakfast.
That's right, because I'm starving in my bedroom, waiting for breakfast to appear, like manna.
Good Sabbath reference, by the way.
Thanks. It is weird maybe when you Sabbath on different days, because you're one person might be working and you're not working, but if you can get past the weirdness maybe that you feel, don't let the enemy make you feel guilty because you're doing something God's asking you to do, even though it might not be on the same day, even though it might not look anything alike. Our days literally look completely opposite, and you get to choose. That's, I think, the best thing about Sabbath is you are given a gift, the only gift you will ever get to choose what's the contents and the inside. You get to decide what's in there. And if you mess up and do something that was stressful one week, then next week, 6 days later, you get to try again. And
yeah,
I love that.
Yeah, it's not ideal, but it's absolutely okay. And there's been a handful of times, if not more, that because of our life circumstance, we would choose to Sabbath on different days in a week. So by all means, if that's the way that you can get Sabbath, then I would definitely say you can do that. I think we have time for this one more. If you are a first responder / safety related position, should you take overtime on the Sabbath? It's a good question. Farron, you want to answer?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah. Oh, it just disappeared. Oh. Carrie took it away. If you're a first responder or some kind of service industry like that, should you take overtime on the Sabbath if it's an option?
I would ask, what is the priority in that choice? I think, that's just the really difficult part. That's why human beings struggle with Sabbath, is everything else in our life tells us that if we're not doing something, we're missing out on something. So if I don't take this opportunity, then I'm being foolish by not gaining more money or more time or XYZ. I think that's just a decision that's going to be between you and the Lord, honestly. But I think if your priority or your fear is, if I don't do this, will I have the ability later on to pay for this or XYZ? I think it's okay to be submitted to the fact of, I am one person in this one day in this one moment, and God is sovereign over all things, and he knows exactly what my day can look like and will look like, and moving forward what my future will be. And give yourself the pressure, relieve yourself of the pressure of, my life is dependent on what I'm doing or not doing, where if you're submitted to the Lord, you can say, man, my time is not even mine. And in particular, on this day, if the hard thing is for me to say no to something because my act of worship is saying yes to what God has commanded me to do, I think as difficult as that is, I think it's worth it in the long run. God is far more invested in our souls and our health and our delight in him versus what's in our paycheck. And as someone who very often has to be reminded during the Sabbath, if you invite God into that, in the time you're not working, to say, God, I'm choosing not to work, and this is so difficult, and this doesn't make sense to me, and I'm man, I'm just having a hard time. I'm sure he is eager to meet you in that anxiety, and that question, and that fear, and guide you more towards what he would call you to do.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Thank you, Farron. They did a great job. Can you say thank you to them? Awesome job, guys. There's a ton more great questions on there, and Sabrina and I on our podcast will answer as many of them as we can. Really good questions. Thanks, guys, for participating. Again, no in-person church this Sunday. On your seats are some invite cards to our Christmas sermon series starting on December 8th. There's more available in the back. Please take those with you. Begin praying for what God's going to do as we talk about the message from the manger. I believe it's going to be very powerful and inspirational as we move our way towards Christmas Eve celebration. If you need prayer for anything, our prayer team will be in the back on the left-hand side on your way out to pray for whatever needs you have. Let me pray for you guys, and then we'll get on out. Lord, thanks so much for a great day of worship and looking at this gift of rest. Lord, may each of us do what we can to honor you and receive the rest that you have for us. In Jesus' mighty name we pray. Amen. Love you guys. Have a great week. See you.